Good morning. Thank you for joining us here at Trinity Baptist on this very special day. And the theme of the talk for this morning, as promised, is joy, continuing on from where we left off in the Advent wreath themes of hope and love and peace and joy. And joy is ordinarily a very appropriate theme at Christmas because it is usually a very joyful season filled with music and song and lights and decorations. And we celebrate, don't we, by getting together with family and friends and by exchanging gifts. It is a joyful time of the year. This year, however, feels a little bit different, doesn't it? It's a Christmas unlike those that have gone before. And many of the things that bring us joy at this time of the year have had to be reduced or modified and sometimes even just cancelled altogether. It's led many, if you look in the media and the newspapers on the TV, to claim that this year's Christmas has been cancelled. However, we know, don't we, that joy doesn't really come from the lights and the decorations and the music, but instead from the meaning of Christmas. And we can tell ourselves that over and over, but it might be that we still feel a sense of sadness for the things that we're missing out on. And so the first thing I want to say today is, you know what, that's okay. Joy isn't the same thing as happiness. And being unhappy isn't a sign of failure as a Christian. We're allowed to feel sad, to grieve for the things that we've lost, and sometimes just to be frustrated or annoyed or even downright angry at the way that things are. And that's not just a message for this year either, because although Christmas is a joyful season, it's also a time that is particularly hard for lots of people, when our feelings of loss for the things that we don't have or the people who aren't with us are often magnified. However, whilst it's absolutely okay to feel all of those things, it is also true, I think, that things are never all good or all bad. Even our happiest moments are often tinged with a little bit of sadness. And so it's true that at our lowest moments, there are things for which we can be thankful, if only we are able to see them. In our reading for this morning, which is a very un-Christmassy reading from Matthew chapter 11, verses 2 to 6, John the Baptist is in prison, and he sends word to the disciples to ask Jesus if he truly was the promised Messiah, or if they should be looking for someone else. And you can appreciate why John the Baptist was having these doubts. He was having a tough time, and things weren't going the way that he thought that they would. He certainly didn't expect to be in prison, but there he was, and so it's understandable, perhaps, that doubts would begin to creep in. And I guess that when we're experiencing tough days, when things aren't going quite as we thought they would, that we might ask that same question as well. Are you really the one, Jesus? I've tried to follow you and I've tried to do what you've wanted me to do, but things aren't looking very promising right now, and I just need to know, are you really the one? Notice, though, how Jesus responds to John's question. We might expect Jesus to answer with just a simple yes or no, but instead Jesus gives a much more convincing answer than a simple yes or no. Jesus says, "Go and tell John what you hear and see. The blind receive their sight, the lame walk, the lepers are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the poor have good news brought to them." The disciples and John had seen Jesus do all of these wonderful things, or at least they'd heard about Jesus doing these things. And all of these are signs of God's kingdom breaking into our space and time, and their confirmation that Jesus really is the true Messiah. Tom Wright refers to these unexplainable moments as being like signposts that point us to God. They're often referred to in other places as being thin place moments, or sometimes as liminal spaces. Those moments where we're able to see God at work in our world, where just for a moment the darkness lifts and the light shines bright. And you know what? The Christmas story is full of these thin place moments, where the two realities of heaven and earth are fused together temporarily. And as I think through those moments, the one word that stands out to me is unexpected. You see, it begins with Elizabeth and Zechariah. They'd been praying for so long to be blessed with a child, and well, it had never quite happened. And now they were at a stage of their lives where they thought that it was impossible. But it's at that moment that heaven and earth meet and an angel brings them the news that God had heard their prayer and they were going to be blessed with a son. Next comes Mary, an equally unexpected meeting of heaven and earth. God doesn't choose a royal princess or a holy priestess, but a plain, and at least to the world's eyes, utterly insignificant young girl. But yet God chose her. God elected her. God addressed her and honoured her and elevated her. And this surprising choice of God isn't limited just to Mary, but rather is a theme of the whole of the Nativity. Because no one would have imagined that shepherds would have been the chosen audience of the angels either. We tend to romanticise shepherds, but most folks in the first century would have found nothing romantic about them at all. They were at the bottom of the socio-economic ladder, dirty and smelly from their work, with no social standing to speak of. Shepherds were just a rung above outcasts. Yet the angels don't appear to those at the temple in Jerusalem or to the well-to-do of Bethlehem, but they come to the shepherds, the last people that anyone would have expected. And we could go on too, couldn't we? Why foreign kings and astrologers and not those of Israel? Why a poor carpenter? And of course, once we've gone this far, we realise that this is the paradigm for most of the biblical story. Why the Jewish nation and not one with greater armies or territory? Why the strange assortment of characters that become prophets? Why the old and childless Abraham and Sarah? Why mischievous, if not downright crooked, Jacob? Why adulterous King David? Why? Well, the list goes right on down, doesn't it? All the way until you get to us. Because we don't always have our lives together as we should, or even as we'd like to. We come with a mix of hopes and fears, moments of faith and an equal number of moments of failing. We come with very little to boast about, if truth be told, and much to confess. We come as those, finally, with no more right to expect God's attention, let alone God's favour, than Mary and the shepherds and all those that we read about in the Christmas story. Yet we are also those whom God has addressed, whom God has called, honoured and elevated. We are God's own beloved children, and the whole of the Christmas story, and indeed Jesus' life and death and resurrection, is intended to assure us of God's love and presence, that we might turn and share that good news with others. And so, however this Christmas morning finds you, whether it's full of joy or mourning the way things used to be, or just tired, frustrated and grumpy, may you also feel the call of God on your life. May you sense his presence with you, and may you see the ways in which the kingdom of God is breaking into our world, the light overcoming the darkness. Thank you for joining me this special morning, and I pray that you have a blessed Christmas, however it is that you are celebrating today.